Hello and welcome to the fourth video in the series of the theory of teaching and methodology. In the first videos I presented to you what a good lesson is and why it is important to have a goal for a lesson and what kind of goal we can pick, like knowledge or skill based, and in how far knowledge and skills are related to each other. And in this video, I would like to focus on how to pick a specific goal for a specific lesson. In general, people who are taking part in a grappling lesson should somehow have gotten an understanding of what grappling is like, but the level of understanding is not the same for each and every participant. So you as a coach, teacher, instructor have to make sure that each and every one of the participants in this class has the chance to actually understand what you're trying to tell them and trying to teach them. As I talked about, as I already mentioned when I talked about the goal setting, there have to be different levels of goals for different levels of students, or there's different levels of students. And it's your job to actually break it down so that everyone can understand what's going on. So in general, grappling is a very complex sport. There are lots of things going on, and there are lots of things going on at the same time. I will talk about what exactly is going on in one of the future videos, where we'll focus on what drills are, what games are, what sparring is, and how these three things are actually one and the same, just with different restrictions. And for now, I would still like to focus on the goals. The goals depend on what you want to teach, what the topic is, and you are the one who has to make things fit the level of the students. So you have to structure it or to arrange it so that they know what you're going to tell them and that they can actually put the small piece that you give them in each lesson into the puzzle so that it makes a bigger picture. So you have to somehow simplify the topic or the goal or a position or a certain technique so that everyone can actually follow your instructions. If you take half guard, for example, there are lots of things going on at the same time. I tried to write down the first things that came to my mind when I would start to teach that position. Things like body positioning. Where do I position my body? Where does the other person position their body? What about pressure? Which kind of pressure do I have to accept or expect? What do I do to relieve that pressure or to simply deal with the pressure? How can I position my head on their chest, on their belly, next to them, depending on where I position my body? What are my arms doing, left leg, right leg? Why do I have to keep toe, knee, and hip line in mind? What does a knee shield, a Z guard, deep half guard have to do with all that? And we have not yet started talking about submission sweeps or passes. So there are lots of things going on at the same time, and you cannot teach each and every aspect of a position or a technique in one lesson. Sometimes people try to do that in seminars, but that's a different kind of setting. A seminar is just a snapshot, and a regular class, as I already explained in the first videos, should not be something individual that does not have any connections to other lessons. It should be part of a curriculum or a training cycle that actually fits the other lessons. So in the end, what you have to do as a coach, teacher, instructor is you have to, on the one hand, at the beginning of the lesson, put the position into context, or even at the beginning of a training cycle, because not every student knows the position. Maybe they have never heard of half guard because they just started doing grappling 2 months ago, and the last training cycle was focused on, let's say, mount and turtle, something like that. And they did not really get any instruction on the position, and they are new to grappling, so they do not do any research on their own at home, and you have not told them about it, so they have no idea what it is. So you have to introduce the position in general. So how do you get there? How do you get out of there? Why is it important for their development as a grappler? When you have done that, then you have to look at the position in isolation. So what are the different concepts, techniques, and different battles that are going on inside the position? Which skills do you need to be successful in the position? It is also important to, when you teach half guard bottom, for example, that you also talk about the aspects from half guard top, so that when people are drilling, half guard top player can actually pretend to be a good half guard top player and give good resistance and make good decisions to make the progressive drilling really something useful. And on the other hand, it makes more sense for the bottom guy to drill things if they know what the natural reactions of the top guy are. And when you have looked at the position in isolation, you have to look at different aspects in isolation, or at least that's what I do. I take different aspects for different lessons. Let's say one lesson just focuses on the body positioning. Another lesson focuses just on what the left arm is doing. Another one on the right arm, and so on and so forth. So that when people drill each aspect, they can find possible solutions to problems that are problems in that position, which we can call battles or sub-battles that have to be won in order to be successful in the position. Maybe you have to introduce some kind of movements to them that they do not know yet, because they will need it to apply them in their position. And of course, general skills like off-balancing your opponent, grip fighting, pummeling, are things that you have to drill and to teach in set position, so that they can use all the different general skills and combine them with the techniques that you may show them. So you have looked at the position in isolation, and you have looked at different aspects in isolation, and then it's very important to go the path back again. So you have to move from isolating each aspect to actually putting it back into the position. And after that, at the end of a training cycle, you should have all the different aspects isolated, put them back into the position which you look in isolation, and then integrate that back into the game that you are playing, or that the student is playing. I learned from Chris from the BJJ and Bruce podcast about the method used by the SBG guys that is called introduction, so getting to know the position, then isolation, so having a look at parts in isolation, and then integration, so putting it back into the framework, which is your own game plan. One important thing to keep in mind as a coach while doing that is that the more you isolate a movement, the less realistic it becomes, because it does not exist in grappling in isolation. There is no such thing as an isolated battle going on in a grappling fight. There are always multiple battles fought at the same time, which makes it so interesting to people who advanced or intermediate level grapplers, but that's exactly what makes it problematic for beginners and beginner level students. You as a coach have to for example, you give them the task to work on their underhooks in half guard, and maybe they come up with solutions how they can pummel and grip fight for that underhook. And that makes sense in isolation, but when you then put it back into the context of the position or of a match, it doesn't make sense. So you have to prepare your students to actually understand that. Even if they find a solution that looks good in isolation, you have to prepare them to fail when they put it back into the context of the position. So looking at things in isolation is not reality, and this is what you have to actually teach them. So this is one of the skills they need besides grappling skill and their grappling knowledge. That's the method, you know what I mean, the method skills and the learning skills. So but the good thing about isolation is that you can actually help them focus on one specific aspect, one specific problem, one specific sub-battle, where they can actually find a solution, where they can use their knowledge that they have, or maybe their intuition, to actually find a solution, to go through this learning and process and experimenting with different solutions and looking for the best solution, so that they can actually think about the problem. These isolations are not set in stone. So as I said already, you just put restrictions around or in a certain position. So you say just focus on the left arm trying to get an underhook in half guard. When drilling, you see that people with a good beginner or intermediate advanced level, they do not need so much time in isolation with that movement, because they already understand it quite well. So you should be able, as a coach, you should be able to make decisions on the fly. And by knowing what you already taught them, and by knowing what you're going to teach them in the upcoming training cycle, you should be able to make good decisions on how to take away restrictions and open up their drills so that they can try to implement their solutions in a more randomized environment, or use speed, intensity, and all these different aspects you can manipulate drills with, which I will talk about in one of the next videos that will be titled Games, Drills, and Sparring, and progression in a lesson, where I will focus on exactly how to manipulate drills on the fly in a lesson. When you focus on specific parts in isolation, it is of course neglecting some other parts, and we do that on purpose. That's why it's important to plan your lessons, what I said in one of the videos before that, like in the lesson planning video and the characteristics of a good lesson video. Having goals is good because it gives you a structure as a coach to actually refer back to if you have any questions while giving a class, because you know where you are in your teaching curriculum, and then you can say, yes, that's a good question, but that has to do with the right arm. You're still struggling with the left arm, keep working the left arm, and next lesson we are going to take a closer look at the right arm, and then we will try to combine them, and then you will get an answer for your question, right? So we are generalizing things sometimes. Again, it does not show reality, and you have to make sure that you as a coach are aware of this and your students are aware of this as well. So the most important part is that you know about your learning objectives, as I mentioned in the video before this video, and that you show your students where they are in this circle that becomes a spiral over time when learning new things. So maybe the idea is getting an underhook in half guard, then they build some kind of product. In this context, it is a solution to how to get to the underhook if they don't have it, or what to do with the underhook, where to place their underhook exactly. Then they measure it by progressively drilling it or using it in a rolling situation. Then they collect data, so they may have experiences that they can then have a look at and learn from. What did work, what did not work, why, and then they can have ideas. Why did it not work? Why did it work? What should I continue to do? What should I improve on to make it even work better or more often? And then they can, again, try to come up with their own ideas, solutions, and then test it again. And this is, again, this learning skill that you have to teach them as well to make them happy in the long run, because that's what they need. Everybody says you need to develop your own game when you're purple belt. Yes, somehow when you're at this intermediate level, you should try to start and develop your own game, have your own ideas. But it's very, very difficult if you do not actually help people to get to that point and already start teaching them how to solve things on their own right from the beginning. So, in general, what this reduction and this focus on one specific goal and one specific aspect does, it helps you to make decisions in general when teaching. Because when you know what you have already done, when you know what you want to do in that lesson and what you are going to do in the next lessons, you can make decisions fairly easily and quickly during the lesson and when planning the lesson. The more you know what you want to do, the easier it is to make decisions. And the easier it will become to actually explain to your students why you are doing this and why they should learn this. And if they have any questions, which is probably the best thing that can happen to you as a coach, a teacher, or an instructor, you can always tell them, we covered that last week. Try to remember that, talk to your partner about it. Maybe you can find it out. If you cannot, I will help you. Or you can tell them, okay, we are going to talk about this next week in detail, but maybe you can already start working on it if you are, if the person is already intermediate or advanced enough to actually start doing this. So again, focusing on one thing makes it much, much easier. It is also good to focus on just one aspect of a position for each lesson, because usually people are not always there. So if they miss a lesson, it's much easier to tell them briefly at the beginning. We are going to talk about lead-ins and why they're important in the next video. At the beginning of the lesson that you talked about the left arm, and now we are going to focus on the right arm. They can much easier get a hang of what is going on with the left arm in 5 minutes at the beginning of a lesson, then they can get an understanding for a whole position in 5 minutes at the beginning of a lesson. So that's why it's important to subdivide each position into sub-battles and look at each aspect individually. And then it's much easier for people who are new, or because even a total beginner should be able to attend a class on half guard when you have already had a couple of classes on that position and still understand what is going on in this small section that you're looking at and practice the skills necessary for that. Maybe just the pummeling or just the grip fighting or just the body positioning, but they should be able to do the class as everybody else is doing, maybe with another goal. Again, the low-hanging fruit that they should be able to reach, but they will successfully complete that lesson, so they will feel good about themselves, they will feel good about the sport, and they will see that they can progress, which then motivates them to come back and continue their journey to become a better grappler. So in the future, as I already mentioned, I will focus on lead-ins next, where I will talk about the difference between lead-ins and warm-ups, why lead-ins are important, or the most important part when we talk about motivation, especially for beginners and for children, as they need a little bit more external motivation. If people are more intermediate, advanced level, they usually are motivated themselves. They know what they are in for and why they want to do that. before then moving on to methods and drills and a little bit of troubleshooting in the end. So see you next time.